estimated 70 to 85 million people lost their lives because of World War II, and of those, approximately 6 million were murdered in German concentration camps. The largest of these camps was Auschwitz, and this is a brief account of two men who survived Auschwitz, escaped from there, and enabled thousands of others to live. In April of 1944, Auschwitz, only one camp in the killing machine that Hitler used for his final solution, was running at full capacity, murdering an estimated 12,000 Jews and other Nazi-described deplorables a day. Two prisoners from the same hometown of Trnava, Slovakia, were brought into Auschwitz 2 years before, and both were determined to alert the outside world of the reality of the camp. Alfred Wetzler was 26, and he had been an actual witness to the destruction of the Theresienstadt family camp. Rudolf Vrba was 19 and had worked in the Auschwitz main camp, where his task was to drag out the dead bodies from the incoming train cars, clear them away, and take the luggage of the deportees, sort it, and prepare it for dispatch to Germany. These men knew exacting details about the number of deportees arriving, their country of origin, the dimensions of Auschwitz, and the size and workings of the gas chambers and crematoriums. Vrba and Wetzler were committed to alert the outside world of the atrocities inside Auschwitz. But how and when? Up until this time, there had been no successful escapes from the camp, and anyone who had tried had been killed, followed by 100 or more prisoners who were publicly murdered as reprisal. The men knew they could wait no longer when Vrba witnessed the construction of a new ramp designed to take greater numbers of deportees directly from the gas chambers to the crematoriums. He also overheard several SS guards boasting about 1 million tasty Hungarian salamis arriving soon, meaning that 1 million Hungarian Jews would soon be sent to Auschwitz for slaughter. At about the same time, Wetzler approached Vrba with an idea. Several weeks earlier, 4 prisoners had escaped from Auschwitz by hiding in a hole beneath a pile of wooden planks that were stacked beyond the camp's inner perimeter and waiting to be used for construction of a new facility. The escapees were later caught, but their initial strategy of hiding beneath the planks had worked. Fearing that the prisoners had revealed their method of escape to the SS, Vrba and Wetzler kept silent. But 2 weeks later, the pile of planks remained. At 2 p.m., Friday, the 7th of April, the eve of Passover, the men climbed inside the hole beneath the woodpile and waited for roll call and their discovery. Then 5:45 and 6 o'clock. Finally, the sirens wailed, and the 2 men heard boots hitting the dirt, guards shouting, and the sound of dogs running across the wood above them. And finally, silence. With roughly 80 miles of Nazi-occupied Poland before them, the men headed south, walking parallel to the Sola River. Losing their way, the 2 wandered into the center of Bielsko. It took them all night to safely wind their way out of the village, only to stumble upon another hamlet just as the sun was coming up. In broad daylight, with nowhere to hide, the men chose a house at random and knocked. A kindly peasant woman, understanding that they were fugitives from the Nazis, fed them coffee and potatoes and told them that their only chance of escape was at night over the Beskid Mountains. Awakened by the woman in the middle of the night, the men set off, but only after she insisted they take her savings, the equivalent of 1 English pound. In the mountains near Porbeka, where earlier the 4 prisoners had been caught, Vrba and Wetzler strayed too close to the Nazi-infested village, and now a German patrol pursued them up the mountainside. This woman, like the peasant before her, knew the 2 men were running from the Nazis. Studying each other in silence, Vrba finally said, "We're headed for the Slovak border. Can you show us the way? We've escaped from a concentration camp, from Auschwitz." The woman told the men to wait until nightfall. She later returned with a man who invited the fugitives into his home and promised to lead them to the Polish-Slovak border the next morning. The following day, Vrba and Wetzler waited in some bushes across from a Slovakian forest. Germans patrolled the area every 3 hours, and as soon as the last one disappeared, the 2 men sprinted into the woods and across the border. It was now 14 days since Vrba and Wetzler emerged from the hole beneath the woodpile. They'd reached Slovak soil and freedom. Now, the men had only one goal: to warn the world about the death factories before the other trains loaded with Jews could be shipped. The men believed that if they could stop the trains from coming to Auschwitz, they could stop the killing. And the way they could stop the trains was to keep the people from ever getting on them. And the way to keep the people from getting on them was for the people to panic. And the way to get the people to panic was for them to know the truth. The truth that the men had to expose was that those prisoners who did arrive alive were quickly sorted by camp guards. 10%, or the young, skilled, and fit, were selected to work in the camp. The other 90%, that included women with children, Those too young to work and the elderly were ordered to walk to a special facility for bathing. There they were brought into a hall where they were told to undress. To complete the charade that they thought they were going to be showered, each person received soap and a towel. They were then crowded into the gas chambers, standing room only. To compress the crowd, shots were fired to make the people huddle closer. When all were inside, the heavy doors were closed. After a short pause to allow the room temperature to rise to a certain level, the SS climbed the roof, opened a small door, and shook down a powdered poison. 3 minutes later, the people were dead, or if there were any signs of life, they were shot. And this all happened within 3 hours of the train's arrival. After several days' rest, the two men were taken to Zalana by train, where they met with the Jewish Council. They were introduced to a variety of people who recorded the eyewitness accounts of the Auschwitz escapees. Over the course of 3 days, their report was written and rewritten 9 times to assure accuracy and clarity. It included the men's descriptions of the conditions and management of the camps, the transports, killing procedures, constructions, security, diagrams of the main and sub-camps, the gas chambers, and the crematoriums. Numerous copies were made of the report and first given to Jews in Slovakia who had contacts in Hungary. Ironically, Jewish leaders were slow to distribute the report because they were fearful of the panic it would cause, the very thing that Vrba and Wetzler wanted. Copies were sent to the Allied nations and even the Pope. Reports began to appear in the New York Times, the Jewish Chronicle, the Manchester Guardian, and aired on the BBC. Allied forces threatened action against those deporting Jewish Hungarians, and the Pope sent a telegram appealing directly to Hungarian regent and head of state Miklos Horthy, who continued to allow trains to transport Hungarian Jews to the German settlement camps because he was fearful of German reprisal. Coincidentally, the United States Air Force bombed Hungary in July of 1944, and though this was not intended to send Horthy a warning about the transports, he took it that way, and finally stopped the trains to Auschwitz. It's estimated that 300,000 Hungarian Jews had already been gassed, and that only 20,000 were actually rescued from the camp. But the trains and all the Jews that would have been on them had been stopped.